All right, part 3, writing the procedure. So we've got this apparatus, this diagram here. We got a Coca-Cola bottle, and we have a ruler, and this is a Mentos. That's a candy. This is a horrible drawing. Hopefully you guys can draw better than I can. But that's my apparatus. And the first step in the procedure is going to briefly describe the apparatus. So something that I could write here, maybe set up a meter stick next to a liter of Coca-Cola. As shown in the diagram. So perfect. That's our step 1 in writing a procedure, is just describing the apparatus. Perfect. And that's all you need. You do not need to say gather materials. Just tell me what we're going to build, make it one sentence, and be done with that part. The next thing that's important is to say is to use verb first language. So you want to use verb first language. What does that mean? So let me give you an example. If you said something like place 2 Mentos in the Coca-Cola, then you're using verb first language. It's starting off with this verb, place. If you were to say something like, we placed 2 Mentos in the Coca-Cola, that would be wrong. You don't want to say, we did this. You are telling the scientist for them to do it. You have to do it. So some other verb first language, think it like, go to bed, open the door, things that start with the verb, and they're commands. So think commands, because you're the writing the procedure. You're commanding the scientist to follow the instructions. Nice. Place 2 Mentos in the Coca-Cola. A perfect procedure also lists the values of the independent variable that will be tested. Okay, so you're going to test an independent variable. So it looks like in this experiment, we're going to change the amount of Mentos. So let's think. We're going to tell them test 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 Mentos. So they are actually listing the values. They're being very specific, listing the values of the independent variable. So the independent variable is the number of Mentos, and they're telling them to test the values of that independent variable. Then a perfect procedure describes how to measure the dependent variable. Measure the dependent variable. For example, what's the effect of putting Mentos in a Coca-Cola? It's going to shoot the Coca-Cola up into the air, and so they're going to measure the spout, how high up it goes. So we can write that in our procedure. Measure, and we're using verb first language. Measure the height of the Coca-Cola spout using a meter stick. Using a meter stick. That's an important piece. Perfect. Very specific. The next thing in the perfect procedure is you want to list the values of the constants. List the values of the constants. Remember, value just means the number. So what would you keep constant in this experiment? I would probably keep the amount of Coca-Cola constant. I wouldn't use, if I did the experiment with 2 Mentos, with 4 Mentos, with 6 Mentos, I would not be doing the experiment with like a 20-liter bottle. I don't know if there's a 20-liter bottle of Coca-Cola, but I would always stick with the 1-liter bottle because you want to keep that constant. And I'm going to mention the 1 liter because I want to mention the value. So keep the volume of Coca-Cola constant at 1 liter. Other constants that you can think of is like how long are you leaving that Coca-Cola in the refrigerator for? Are you not going to shake the Coca-Cola by doing something very specific? But in this case, a perfect procedure, I've mentioned the value, 1 liter, and I didn't forget my units, which is nice too. And a perfect procedure also includes any scientific measuring instrument used in the experiment. So what is a scientific instrument? We've already done that, which is nice. So when we said measure the height of the Coca-Cola spout using a meter stick, so we've mentioned, we've mentioned the scientific instrument that we're going to be using. So just as other examples, besides meter sticks, we might be using things like stopwatches. We're not going to use that in this Mentos experiment. Stopwatches, thermometers are important that we might use. We might use a mass scale. We're going to be using a bunch of other things like force sensors, motion sensors, slow motion cameras. But I want you guys in your procedures to make sure that you include any scientific measuring instruments. Okay. So let's think about our spaghetti bridge experiment, and let's quickly write an example procedure. So let's remember these 4 words: build, test, measure, keep. Build, test, measure, keep. So you can almost, I used set up, but you could say build with the apparatus. Build, test, measure, keep. So they're all in there. And that's going to set up your steps for your procedure. And if you can keep your procedure in under 4 steps, that makes Mr. Riparetti very happy because it's really easy to score. All right. Build a spaghetti bridge as shown in the apparatus diagram. So apparatus diagram. And remember, apparatus just means the experimental setup. That was super simple. I just said, look at the diagram and build that. Fine. That's fine for step number 1. Test the following bridges with different amounts of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. In our case, we're changing the number of spaghetti with different amounts of noodles. We're testing 2 noodles, 4 noodles, 6 noodles, 8 noodles, 10 noodles. Measure the number of pennies that caused the bridge to collapse. Measure the number of pennies that caused the bridge to collapse using in this case, we don't really have a scientific instrument that we're going to use, so I'm just going to cross this out. That caused the bridge to collapse. You can use the scientific instrument of your brain, and you could say, caused the bridge to collapse by counting the pennies. I think this was in there because some people measure the mass of the pennies and they use a scale to do that by counting, but we can just keep it like that. Keep the span/gap width constant at 18 centimeters. Okay, so we're listing the value of the constants. Also, keep the brand of spaghetti constant, or the type of spaghetti. Yeah, you don't want to be changing the type of spaghetti. I got several different types of spaghetti in my room, so I'm going to make sure that I don't change that. Okay, so this is a perfect procedure. It does all the things that we need it to do. Perfect.